Yeah, let's go around and just kind of see if there's any magnetic field things going on in the living room. We might not find anything, but we will probably find something in the kitchen, and if we get lucky, the fridge will be running.
All right, cool.
So,
sounds good. Hey, River and Taryn, you guys can come follow us around if you guys want to see how this device works.
Here, I'll actually turn the volume up too, so we can get some more dramatic.
And for any of you who are listening to this podcast, like I mentioned, we're video recording this whole thing, and this is the type of show, if you are listening in, I would recommend you go to bengreenfieldfitness.com/shielded healing podcast and watch some of the video too, because it's going to be super informative for you. Some of this stuff is hard to visualize when you're listening.
So yeah, that's a good point. So what I like to do in an assessment is try to help people visualize it. I make the invisible visible, and also the inaudible audible. And that helps people who are somewhat skeptical to understand what's going on and to see it. Because this stuff we can't see, we can't hear it, and it's really important to be able to show people what's going on. So you want meters that make the most sound and have the most visual stimulation so that you can convince people and show them how it's actually affecting the body. So there's not really an issue here in the living room that I'm detecting.
Now, there is one device in the living room, and I'll point this out as we go through. There are certain, people are always sending me these so-called personal protection devices, or, things that are supposed to help with protecting the body or with mitigating the effects of EMF. And this one right here, sitting on top of the piano, it's called the Concerto, and this is supposedly supposed to offer some kind of EMF protecting effect when placed in a room. So are you able to test something like that at all, see if it's effective, or even see if it's ineffective?
Well, I can test to see.
It's obviously producing a huge amount.
It's producing magnetic field when you get really close.
Yep. Now,
so you wouldn't want this right next to your bed, for instance, where your head is.
Now, what about if River or Taryn were sitting at the piano, playing the piano, they're about 2 feet from this device, that might be affording some protection, but as you alluded to, as you get very, very close to the device, the protection is offset by the amount of radiation that it actually produces.
Yeah, it can.
In this case, magnetic radiation, right?
Yeah, I would say it can be offset by it if it's too close, because really, right where they'd be sitting, we're about 0.3. If I get about maybe 8 inches away, it goes up to 0.5.
And is there a way to test whether or not something like that is effective as advertised, is doing what it's supposed to be doing, besides paying attention to whether you sleep better when it's in your house, or whether your blood inflammatory markers might go down, or something self-quantitative like that? Do you have a device that can measure the effectiveness of something like that?
Well, usually what I have to know about, I have to know more information about the device to test it. So if it purports to block magnetic fields, for instance, I would say probably not, because it's creating a magnetic field.
Right.
And then if it's purporting to protect from wireless, we need to test it with a different meter.
Let's see if this literature on top of no, these are the instructions for tuning the drum. Yeah, it doesn't exactly say, but it's called a Light Rhythms Concerto. We could look it up. Here, I'll look it up as you're going around testing a few other things in the room, and I'll let you know what it supposedly says that it does on its website.
Yeah, so we can maybe pull out a different meter or a few different meters and test that. But I'm just going to go in the kitchen now and see if there's anything going on. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and open the fridge, and the freezer, see if we can get the fridge to run so I can show people what that does. Got some goat milk in here, some good healthy food.
Sprouts.
Lots of sprouts, yeah. All right.
Yeah, so what it says about this Concerto, Brian, is that it works quietly against the effects of cell phones, smartphones, tablets, and Wi-Fi polluted areas, and relieves from EMF stress, increasing productivity and concentration while guarding against the negative effects of electromagnetic fields.
Okay.
That's what it says it's doing, counteracting the negative effects of electromagnetic radiation by creating a coherent field that reduces the effects of EMF pollution.
Okay.
So what say you to that, Brian?
All right. Well, I say that it's hard to any device that I've seen that talks about creating a harmonic field or a coherent field, they've not been able to show, in my experience, that that's actually being created with any kind of equipment.
Now, could you, for example, I mean, what if you were to put a cell phone next to that that's producing a field, and then what would you test? Because I can take my cell phone right now and set it over there.
Yeah, we can. So we'll.
So we're going to test one of these so-called EMF protection devices. Not that they're all created equal, but they all kind of sort of say they do the same thing. So my phone's in airplane mode right now.
Okay.
I'm going to take my phone out of its little protective case just to get the full effect. This is the iPhone 11, which supposedly does produce a pretty high amount of radiation, but it's in airplane mode right now.
Okay. So we've also got this is actually a perfect example because we got the wireless lav mics on as well.
Okay.
So you can see I'm almost maxing out my body voltage meter with these.
So you're testing your own body voltage.
Body microvoltage.
Body microvoltage.
For radio frequency radiation.
Okay.
Yep. So we're measuring the body as an antenna.
Okay. And then are you saying we flip this off and see if your body voltage is just as high?
Yep.
Okay, so right now your body voltage, as you're standing next to this thing with it on and lav mic's producing, should I turn my cell phone on too?
Yeah, go ahead and turn your cell phone on.
So I'm going to flip the cell phone on, so we're throwing a little bit more in there. I'm going to put my cell phone right in front of Brian.
So it's maxed out the meter.
And we've pretty much maxed, now that the cell phone's on, all the meters are maxed out. We're through the roof now. And all I did was take the cell phone out of airplane mode. So now, if I unplug this, it should theoretically get even higher, right? It should get even worse, correct? So should I turn this off?
Yeah, let's go ahead and turn it off.
I'm just gonna unplug it here, or here. Okay. Okay. It should be off now. That little green light off. Still on?
Still on.
Oh wait, maybe I gotta turn it off on the back of it. Let's try this. Okay, there, it's off. Anything change?
Nope.
Okay, I'm gonna flip it back on now.
They're the same.
Okay, now it's back on. So I'm just getting a higher readout.
Yeah, so we're still getting the same.
Now, unfortunately, what the scary thing is between two lav mics and a cell phone, we were maxed out, even almost unable to test this thing. We got so maxed out just from having two devices running next to our bodies. Now, what's the acceptable level of microvolt radiation that you would normally want?
Well, I like it to see below 1,000 in the daytime areas.
And we were at 8,000 and got up above 10,000 once we flipped the cell phone on.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then in the bedtime areas, I like to see, it depends on the intensity in the area. I mean, if we're getting if we're like in Seattle and we're measuring like downtown within line of sight of the Queen Anne towers, anyone who lives in the Pacific Northwest has been to Seattle, you know those huge towers, there's like 3 of them on this huge hill. They're radio and television and cell phone towers that are blasting the entire city. They're red and white colored. You can't miss them. You look at the landscape or the cityscape of Seattle and you notice those. Everybody knows those as the Queen Anne towers. Those are blasting the entire city. So if you can see those, we want the level in a shielded room in that area below 500 would be good.
Wow.
But in a place like here where where things are relatively low in the country, as low as possible, but I like to see it below 100. I would consider that a successful.
Below 100. Okay.
Yeah.
But when we get next to a device that's supposed to be protecting us from EMF, we're jumping up above 8,000. But part of that is obviously these lav mics and everything that we're wearing.
Right.
But all we know is that this device didn't seem to protect us from that at all. When flipped on or off, it didn't make a difference.
Yeah, it doesn't. A lot of these devices, I would say they may, it's debatable whether it supports your body in dealing with a stressor.
Mm-hmm.
But when they claim that it's blocking the frequency or canceling it out. I've never seen that to be true with,
You've
the
tested
measurements.
a multitude of these devices very similar to what we just did, and
Yes.
you're not finding evidence that they actually block an actual field. You're not discounting the fact that perhaps there is, if someone sleeps better, if their inflammation drops, great. But what they're not doing in most cases from your testing is actually blocking some type of field from a cell
That's
phone
right.
or a Wi-Fi router. So if I were to have a Wi-Fi router on the other side of this and we were to test with this on versus off, you wouldn't notice that it's somehow creating this protective shield around our bodies or something like that.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I wouldn't be able to measure that.
to
But
know.
I will show you something
You're going to piss a lot of manufacturers off of all these
I
devices.
know. I hopefully won't get it.
And again, we're not saying they don't work to do something, but they're definitely not doing, according to what you've tested, what they say they're doing as far as blocking some of these fields.
Yeah, if they claim to block or cancel the fields out, and you have to look at the wording very carefully too, because you can say it cancels the effects of the fields out. That may be true, but we
Right.
don't really have a way to measure
not-
that and show scientifically.
Aside from doing like pre and post with a pretty good probably washout and preferably in a double-blind scenario, someone's inflammatory markers or HRV or something like that.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
and there's there's also this case of all the Bruce Lipton stuff, the biology of belief,
Right.
and in a double-blind placebo-controlled study, that's that usually controls for the placebo effect, right? But there's also this thing I read about, and I'll have to look for the documentation on it, but it's called like the double placebo effect. Like if somebody is doing a study and they have this intention, kind of like how qigong or prayer works. You can be kind of hoping, praying that something's going to work and have an effect
Yeah.
on the
Which
study.
is why it's important that the researcher is also blinded.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the researcher, and maybe even done without the knowledge of the company,
Yeah.
doing
Wow.
it. So it's really hard, and there's a lot of things that we don't know about how powerful the human mind is, and as, when you get into the more spiritual,
Yeah.
esoteric stuff, it's a whole different realm. And what I really try to focus on is it making a difference in these
Right.
meters?
Right.
And-
I mean, I certainly believe that probably if I were to go eat a McDonald's hamburger now, it would probably do more harm to my body than when I would eat a McDonald's hamburger when I was 12 and have no clue about any of the, the vegetable oils or the toxicity or the inflammation or anything like that.
Right.
Now just knowing what it does to me, I think sets myself up to be even more biologically damaged
Totally.
by something you think and know is unhealthy for you.
Yeah.
And it's super interesting.
So
the
that-
mind over matter effect.
Yeah, that actually brings up a huge point that I make whenever I do an EMF assessment, because a lot of people, after we're done here, and maybe after you guys are done listening to this podcast or watching this, you're going to feel so overwhelmed. Oh my gosh,
Right.
we're
It's like
we're
all
done
of a
for.
sudden I can't sleep.
Yeah, I'm worried
Yeah.
about this, and I always make a point that we will provide a protocol for you to do what you can, and the goal is to recreate an ancestral healing environment in your bedroom, in your home, the places where you spend the most time, help people prioritize what's most important, and then get on with your life and put in there's some nutritional strategies, some food strategies that you can do to help mitigate the damage that's done during the day when you are exposed, or when you're inevitably exposed at different times, during the season when you have to go to a business trip or whatever. But
Yeah.
you put those in place and then stop stressing out about it.
Yep.
You have to have a lifestyle
Yeah.
that matches.
When I interviewed Dr. Mercola, we talked a lot about that, about everything from carbohydrate mitigation and ketone bodies having a protective effect on some of the inflammatory pathways. We talked about high magnesium intake and mineral intake having a positive effect on some of the deleterious effects of this calcium channel influx. We talked about getting a diet rich in sirtuins, and also potentially even supplementing with something like NAD as being protective
Right.
against some of the ionizing and non-ionizing radiation damage. And so there are certainly things that you can do from a nutritional or a supplementation standpoint as well, which is kind of a whole different topic. But yeah, I mean, you can add. It's not as though you're disempowered.
Right.
There are things that you can do, and we talked about a lot of them in our previous podcast, like turning off the Wi-Fi router and hardwiring instead, or using that phone trick that we just talked about, plugging your phone in instead of having it out of airplane mode. But there's plenty that you can do. But back to the testing. All right, so what's the next thing that we do here?
Well, we'll if we're done with the magnetic fields in the area, I think the fridge has been open for a while. We can see if there's a magnetic field coming off of that too. But yeah, just we kind of scan for magnetic field issues, flipping on and off lights. Dimmer switches are often a problem that we look for with the magnetic fields if there's a wiring error, especially.
Okay.
But we already tested this house for magnetic fields and nothing really came up. So we should just probably move on to the next thing, and we'll do the wireless.
The only newer areas we'd want to test would be like the guest house, for example, or new construction that's occurred since you were last here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So if we find something, we'll show that.
All right. All right.
But yeah. So actually, if we can get your boys down here, we can.
Hey boys, come on down.
They can have some of these.
Why don't you guys stick around down here on the main floor and just shadow us, okay? Rather than hanging out up there. Don't worry. People don't mind you guys being in the camera. You got a lot prettier faces than Dad does, so.
Okay. So we do have a lot of interference from the lav mics. So I'm just going to start off on this because I can show people.
Would it be helpful if I put my lav mic in a Faraday cage? Because I have one downstairs.
Well,
I feel like I should anyways, now that you've got me freaked out. So I'm not even going to wait for your reply. I'm going to run down and grab that.
Here.
Well, keep rocking and rolling.
All right, so I'm going to turn on, this is a real-time radio frequency spectrum analyzer. It's a German-made device. And what I'm going to do is we're going to test just the whole range of frequencies from 0 to 12 gigahertz. So I'm actually going to start off at 20 megahertz frequency, and then I'm going to end at 12 gigahertz. And then I'm going to be looking at the peaks here. So we got peaks in 7.8, 7.2 gigahertz, 2.9, 3.5. So these are all frequencies that are coming in from outside the house. And let's see if we can find what the frequency is from my microphone back here. My antenna. So I'm taking the antenna and putting it around the back here. Looks like 3.5. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move this to a different setting. And I'm going to go to 3.5 gigahertz. Nothing there. 2.45 gigahertz. That's not it. 900 megahertz. Let's see.
My Faraday bag is much shinier than Brian's.
There we go. So
Yeah,
we
larger.
might have a problem if you close it all the way up with the mic getting a signal.
We'll find out. I mean, I can't close it all the way because the wire's got to come out, but.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. I'm Faraday bagged up. We still getting audio? Sweet. Camera guy says thumbs up. Camera guy, by the way, today is Wilbur Sensing, at Wilbur Sensing on Instagram. I'll link to his stuff in the show notes if you guys want to check out some of his videographer work. He's the crack video team we hired out of Spokane here.
Okay.
All right, so what are we looking at now?
Looks like we got the 900 megahertz frequency. I think that's what we're operating on with the lav mics.
Okay.
So we're doing okay with that now. Let's see.
So are you essentially doing that so you can identify as you're testing whether it's the lav mic that's creating an issue versus something else?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we're going to actually check the... Okay, so we got a lot of radio stations here. So I'm going to do that. I remember that from the last podcast. We detected a radio station, and we'll see. I'll bring out that meter that I used last time. Actually, I got one that has a better speaker on it, so...
So we're actually getting a signal from a radio station passing into our house.
Yes.
Now, how much of an issue is that? Like, biologically, have you seen evidence that that's going to cause much damage?
Yeah, actually, the radio frequencies from the FM radio stations, they resonate even more with the human body than a lot of the higher frequencies do.
Oh, wow.
So
out here, even in the middle of the forest, we're getting some radio towers emitting their radio frequencies into our house.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're able to determine whether the quantity of that wave is going to be an issue.
You can hear it.
It's kind of scary. So when we're sitting here eating dinner at night, that's going through our heads, that noise?
Yeah, that's why people get songs stuck in their heads and
You're kidding
voices
me.
in their. Yeah, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah, you're full of it. Careful. You don't want to lose your credibility with folks. You're the boy who cried wolf here.
All right. So this will kind of show you. This is
By the way, have you read the book, Brian, which I just finished, called The Invisible Rainbow?
Yeah, I've got a copy in my.
Okay, if you guys are
truck,
listening
actually.
in, I think that book, it's kind of like when you're holding a hammer, the world looks like a nail. It pretty much blames every single disease known to man on radio waves and electricity. And I don't know if I think like the 1918 flu pandemic was because there was some kind of radio rollout around that same time, and neither do I think that 5G caused coronavirus. So the book has a lot of like correlative data in it that I don't necessarily agree with, but reading it is thought-provoking when it comes to the actual correlation between electrohypersensitivity and a lot of these waves where we essentially live in a soup of electricity that human beings up until 100 years ago never lived in. And that book is pretty scary when it shows kind of the patterning between all these different diseases and the frequency of exposure to a lot of these things. Even the seemingly harmless old school AM/FM radio, which we think is nothing compared to it's like a cell phone that's on in our pockets. There's actually some stuff going on there.
Right. We think that because it's been around a long time, it must not have an effect.
Right.
But then we look back at history, and correlation is not causation. But how healthy are we? Since we started, we can blame it on the foods of convenience, as Weston A. Price would call them, but and the processing of the food and the chemicals and things like that. But at the same time, we were also having this huge influx of this
I
wireless
think
radiation.
It's a cluster of factors, right? It's stress, it's lack of presence and awareness, it's sympathetic nervous system response to that, it's metal overload, it's electrical exposure, it's ultra-processed foods. But I think that radio waves and electromagnetic waves are certainly part of that factor.
Definitely, yeah. It's a perfect storm that we've created for chronic illness. So just to show you the effect of the radio frequency, FM radio versus like something that's a higher frequency, I'll just kind of show you this so we can kind of zoom in with the camera here. When I touch this, see how that spikes up? That means the signal is stronger. So I'm going to reset this here. So right now we're just detecting what this little antenna is detecting. And when I touch my body to that, it spikes up the level like at least tenfold, maybe more. So that's why when you grab a TV antenna or a radio antenna back in the day when we used to have the little bunny rabbit ears, you can your body actually acts as the antenna.
I told River and Taryn when I was a little boy, I had a TV hidden in my closet that my parents didn't know about, that I would sneak out at night to watch all the TV shows like X-Files and Married with Children. Just all these shows I'd watch that my parents didn't want me to watch at night. But a lot of times I found that if I held the TV antenna, I could get a lot better reception. And I even had like little coat wire hang-ups where I could just go lounge in my bed and be holding the coat wire, and the coat wire would be attached to the TV antenna. And it actually worked. I used my body as an antenna. And probably even more scary, I've noted that if I have a poor connection on my phone and I take it out of its protective case and then use my body as almost like to amplify the signal, and we tested this the last time you were at the house, your phone uses your body as an antenna. And we tested my own voltage on my human body with the phone on versus off, and it went through the roof.
Yep.
Yeah. Which is yet another reason that maybe having a good selfie stick could be a good idea.
Yeah, definitely.
Or at least being careful how much you actually handle your phone while it's on, using your body as an antenna.
Yeah. So it's really important to understand how because your body's conductive, that you're actually collecting these frequencies, these microvoltages from all these different plethora of frequencies that are bombarding our
Right.
homes and workplaces and everywhere that we go. And it's your body's actually not only being influxed with those frequencies, but your skin is actually resonating a frequency as well, and it's creating a secondary frequency that goes into the body. And so, in really high radio frequency areas, you can measure this phenomena that's happening, and it's happening on a smaller level when you have a lower amount of radiation. But I could be as far as like we've done a lot of shielded rooms, shielded spaces, and in the places where you have the most